everybody. Thank you again for joining us for another session with our professional nursing mentor series. Today we're talking with Savannah, and this is her second video in the series. So without further ado, I'll let Savannah take it away.
Okay. Okay, I am just going to address several of the questions that I got over email that the students, I assume, submitted. So I will kind of just go over some of those and hopefully give some valuable information. One of the ones that caught my eye, and I don't know if I'm the only one who said something about this, but I did talk about nursing in the tribal community. And I talked about my first job in nursing was with the Choctaw Nation. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. I don't remember exactly everything I said, but I did. So I had attended a school that was private and was very expensive. So I graduated with lots of student loans, and the opportunity was presented to me to be a nurse at Choctaw Nation. I myself am not Choctaw. I am married to a Choctaw and have Choctaw children. But at the time, I was like, I can still work there and still like work towards paying off my student loans. And they said, absolutely. So I inquired about that. At the time, it was a national nursing shortage. So when I interviewed for my job, they told me I could work anywhere in the hospital that I wanted to. I did choose labor and delivery. Had to work there. So I got student loan repayment two different ways. I received student loan repayment from Choctaw Nation themselves, and then I also received it from IHS, which was Indian Health Services. So, in order to receive those funds for my student loans, I had to work there for an entire year before I ever received any money for my student loans from Choctaw Nation. That was their stipulation. And then the IHS program is I had to work there for a year before I even applied. So when I started working there, I wasn't sure that I would even be accepted into the IHS student loan repayment. They have several criteria online, and several of which are like a critical shortage facility, which is most facilities. The facility being in a rural area, they had this big checklist, and Choctaw Nation fulfilled the majority of those. So I knew going to work there that I was likely to be chosen for student loan repayment through IHS. And I don't know what their program looks like now, but back then it was like they paid off 30% of your student loans over a period of 3 years. And so after I'd worked there for a year, I did apply and I was accepted. Um, and so I mean, I'll just tell you real numbers, but when I graduated, I had $60,000 worth of debt. And then 3 years later, they had paid off 30,000. So they paid off half of it in 3 years, which did not include my pay. So I was paid normal. IHS would deposit the money into my bank account every month, and I would just send it straight to Sally Mae, who had my loans at the time. Um, so that was kind of how that worked. And there's an option to re enlist in the program. Um, and I chose not to. I was offered a job as a unit manager over a labor and delivery unit. So I only did it for a 3 year period. Um, but I will say, working for Choctaw Nation was the best job I ever had. I loved the people. I loved Choctaw Nation. The experience working there was invaluable. And it was very interesting after I started working or started taking students to clinical in Oklahoma City. I found out how much I learned and how much I was capable of doing because I worked there. And it was a rural hospital, so you're kind of trained to do everything. And I learned that that was a special skill. In bigger cities, in bigger hospitals, they're not trained like that. They're trained very one direction. They do one thing which is great in some aspects. But as far as being a nurse, it was a lot of fun to be somewhere that I could show up one shift and take care of a labor patient, and then take the next shift, take care of a baby, and then the next shift. I mean, it was very varied, the care that I got to give. And so I enjoyed that a lot. Um, I'm trying to think. Choctaw Nation was full of incentives as far as like the more certifications we got while we worked, they increased our pay. We were very valued there as nurses because um, I think it was the tribal council's outlook, and it was, um, there weren't very many of us, and they have a hard time. They have to recruit for doctors and nurses. They have to recruit a lot, and they're just in a rural community, so it's just hard um, to hire all the doctors and nurses that you need to when you're kind of in the middle of nowhere. So we were valued a lot. I feel like for being there and for doing a good job, and I really, really loved it. I'm trying to think if there's any other specific. I didn't stay long enough to be offered to continue my education or anything like that, but I know they do things like that, where if you're employed there and you want to advance your career, they will help you do that, especially once you um, sign a contract to work for Choctaw Nation. I think my mother-in-law did it a while ago, and it was like for 2 years. They paid for her RN license, and then she worked there for an additional 2 years. So that was great. Um, but yeah, it was a very good experience. I loved it so much. Um, but yeah, I really enjoyed working for Choctaw Nation, and it was so helpful to be able to be paid a normal nurse way salary and get my student loans paid off. So um it was definitely surreal to like move somewhere like that, because I had lived in Oklahoma City and I moved to Tallahena, Oklahoma, which I grew up there, but I hadn't lived there in a long time. So that was a challenge just because it's, moving somewhere smaller and somewhere different. Um but the people were great and the experience was great. So, and a lot of the people that work there for decades. I mean, there were tons of people um, that I worked with who had worked there for 30 years and um, loved their jobs with Choctaw Nation. So it was a tight knit community, and it was just a lot of fun. It was also strange, I will say, to go. That was my first nursing job where, yes, we had budgets. Yes, we had ways that we did patient charges and those sorts of things. But then to go work at a hospital that wasn't connected to Choctaw Nation was such a wake up call, because everything was so much more limited. And I was like, what do you mean this is a problem to provide for the patient? Because when you're in Indian healthcare, that's not really a thing. They would charge their patients insurance. But if they wanted to stay an extra night because they needed help, whatever, we would just let them stay an extra night, because it doesn't matter if insurance pays for it or not. And so when I went to a different hospital and that mattered, I was like, okay, this is very different priorities, different decision making processes. Um, so anyway, it was good. I loved it a whole lot. So,
No, it's
are
really
there any
cool.
yeah, are there any questions you can think of about that?
I guess for like the programs, are those pretty common, like wherever you go, whether that's like paying off your student loans while you're working, or if like you had mentioned the more certifications you got, the more you would get paid. Like, is that pretty common through everywhere, or is that just like more for like tribal nations?
Um, I think it's definitely the getting your student loans paid off is definitely more prominent. Not every hospital that you go work for is going to have a program. And sometimes they do have a program to help you pay off your student loans, but it's like $5,000 in 2 years. And then that's the cap. So it's a lot less as far as the amount that you have access to. And then I'm pretty sure most nursing jobs, when you get more certifications and those sorts of things, they increase your pay. I think that's more common. Um, but yeah, the student loan, when the one of the large hospitals in Oklahoma City was like, "We'll pay $5,000." I was like, "Well, I have 60." So 5,000 doesn't really that's kind of just a drop in the bucket. That's interest. So, so yeah, I had to do something so that I could get those paid off and done with. Um but yeah, it was great. I loved it for lots of different reasons, but that was definitely a benefit that was worth, pursuing a job there. So,
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing that.
yeah. Let's see. This one of the questions is about nursing internships, if they're worth it, if they set you up for jobs after graduation. It depends. So, I think it depends on what you want to do. If you want to be somewhere that is limited and difficult to step into, like labor and delivery, a nurse internship will definitely get your foot in the door. If you already know people on the floor, the nurse managers already know you, of course, that makes you prime candidate for working there. The other advantage of that is if you got a nurse internship there and you hated it, you wouldn't have to have a job there, and find out that way. So, I think they're definitely worth it. Now, do I think that you have to have a nurse internship to work where you want to work or, get a good job? You don't. But yeah, the advantages is just they know your name, they know your face. When you apply to work there, you're not just a name in the stack of names. And if you already know, pretty much how to function like a CNA, then they know you already know a lot about how the floor runs. It makes your orientation more specific and just less overwhelming because you already know a lot about the floor. I did not do a nurse internship. Actually, got a nurse internship in Oklahoma City on the pediatric oncology floor, which is what I really wanted to do all through nursing school. But I did give that up to go to get my student loans paid off. So yeah, I do, but it did set me up. I mean, they basically said, you'll do the internship this summer and then you'll be on staff after you pass the NCLEX. I mean, they just set it up that way. And I think, especially on that floor, it's more difficult to hire nurses because it is very specialty. A lot of people don't want to work there because it's difficult. So, it's just a lot to deal with. Kids and cancer is hard. So I think that it really just depends on what you want to do and where you want to go. And if you're, yeah, if sometimes getting your foot in the door in labor and delivery is difficult because they want to train you in postpartum first and you work night shifts and all these sorts of things. Um, and there's a lot of people who want those jobs. So yeah, I think if you work something that's specialty at all, an internship is definitely an advantage when you go to apply for a job. So, are there any other questions you can think of or that you've heard the students ask about internships?
No, they definitely asked some questions about internships. I guess what would be like the easiest way for people to start like applying for these internships or like looking for them? Like, is there anything that you would recommend on that?
The best thing to do is just get on whatever hospital's websites are in your area. A lot of them start earlier than you think they do. So, like, if you have students who are going to be seniors next year, probably mid fall, I would start looking and seeing what they were doing for internships in the spring and summer. Sometimes they just come out with the dates of like, the application deadline is December or something like that. Um, but they're going to be earlier than you think. Uh, because it's a long process for them to like get through all those applications, and then they do interview you in person, and then they hire, and then so, and they want to have all that set up by the time the internships start in the summer. So I would say like probably mid fall semester, that's when you could look at different hospitals websites or call or email somebody and say, hey, can you just tell me dates of when that will open up, or when the application deadline is, or whatever. So yeah, we had a lot of students, it kind of like crept up on them because middle of the fall semester, you're not thinking about next summer. You're just trying to make it through whatever's in the middle of your semester. Um, so that definitely can like creep up on you. But so that would probably be my biggest piece of advice. But yeah, just you could always, if they don't have it published on their website, you could call and ask. They'll have some sort of nurse recruiter or somebody who could email you or call you and tell you when your application deadline is. So that's probably my biggest piece of advice about that. Just don't let it go too late.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Um, trying to think. This one bullet point just says post graduation. So I think that's kind of hard. I It's so hard when you realize that after you graduate, it's the last free summer of your life. That you're like, I'm about to enter a career and then I'm never going to get a summer again. Um, so that's hard, especially when you start talking about internships. You're like, do I want to start yet? Do I want to? I was a camp counselor every summer during college, and I made what's the word I'm looking for? The controversial decision to go be a camp counselor all summer after I graduated instead of taking an internship or immediately taking my NCLEX. And it worked out. Because I did say this is the last summer of my life. I'm never going to get to have this much time off from my job to go to all these camps all summer. So I want to do that. So I did, but I did study all summer. And I will tell you the biggest variation I've seen from nursing students who pass their NCLEX the first time versus the ones that don't is the amount of time that they study on their own. It's not a predictor test. We did different review courses, and there were um, girls in my class that every predictor test we took said they would pass the first time. And so they kind of stopped studying and took the NCLEX a month later, and they didn't pass. Okay. I, on the other hand, I think I took two predictors over whether I would pass the first time, and both of them told me I would not. So I got real serious and studied all summer, and I didn't take the test until August. We graduated in April, and I took the test in August, and I did pass the first time. But I spent hours upon hours upon hours. I studied a lot. So I will say that post graduation, no matter what you decide to do, if you decide to get an internship, great. If you decide to go to camp all summer, great. But you need to be studying. Um, and I did at camp, like whenever we had downtime during the day, I was studying. I mean, so I just committed that I would have to do that. That was way back in the day when you would get an NCLEX book and like go through it. I don't even know if those exist anymore. But I made it through the entire book that summer and studied stuff online. Like I studied a lot. So I would say that like post graduation, no matter what you decide to do, or if you don't, if you have plans and you don't take your test till July or August or whatever, just be studying. Don't I don't care what the predictor tests tell you. If they tell you you're going to pass the first time, you need to study. If they tell you you're not going to pass the first time, you need to study. It doesn't, that's really not the factor that I've seen make the biggest difference. It's really their personal commitment to to just locking it down and figuring it out. Because everybody's knowledge gaps after graduation are different. The things that you forget are, something else somebody else has mastered, and, vice versa. So when you take those predictor exams, start at where your lowest knowledge base is, your biggest knowledge gap, whether it's pharmacology or whatever the test says, that's where you're going to start studying. Um, and yeah, just commit yourself. And I think that's the most important thing post graduation. I don't think you have to immediately, you know, start working, or whatever you need to do is what you have to do. But that's what I've noticed is the biggest difference is how much students commit their own personal time and are disciplined. So, um, what other are there any other post graduation questions you've heard the students ask?
Um, Nothing too specific. It was just like post graduation. That's all they got.
I know,
That's all they gave me. So
like after I've lived in school and breathed school, and what do I do with myself? um, yeah, it's weird. It's strange
very
because,
weird.
like, I went to a 4-year university, but that was my life 4 years straight, summers, everything. I was there. And then I graduated and moved out that same day or the next day. I think it was the next morning after graduation. And it was just done. It's so strange. And I'm like, it's still hard to believe that all those people will never congregate again. Like, it's
It's
weird.
it's a very weird feeling.
Yes, it's a very strange feeling. And if you're like me, you still feel like a little kid that they like let you be a nurse. I mean, I remember walking into patients' rooms, and I was 22 when I got my license. And I would walk into a patient's room, "Hi, my name's Savannah. I'm gonna be your nurse today." And they'd be like, "Are you old enough to do this?" I'm like, "What?" I guess they gave me a license. Like, I don't know. So yeah, you still feel
They
like a
said I
kid.
can.
Yeah, I know. I was like, apparently, I don't know. No. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is to, and you can have study groups, that's fine. You can, it's not that you can't study with other people. It's just you need to be very aware where you stand, and focus on that. That's definitely a big predictor over whether you will pass the NCLEX the first time. If you don't, I don't know if anybody's talked about this, but if you don't pass the NCLEX the first time, just keep on keeping on. I mean, you can take that test every 45 days for 2 years without any penalty. Nobody's going to stop you. Nobody's going to be like, "Excuse me, you took it too many times," until that 2 years is over. And then each state has their own, like the Board of Nursing has their own requirements for remediation, which are not horrible. They're actually done very well, and statistically really helps students who don't pass in those 2 years to pass. But I just say you just need to commit to taking it every 45 days. And it is expensive. It is not cheap. But go live with your mama or your daddy or your aunt or your cousin or whoever, and just commit that money. Save it, spend it, do it, because the more you take, if herbs or your chew or whatever, it's going to help every time. I will say too, the nice thing to do if you don't pass is um, they send you where your knowledge gaps were, like what section of the tests that you did not um, make a high enough score. And so that helps too when if you don't pass to help study. But listen, you're not the first person to not pass it the first time, and you won't be the last. And when you get your license, nobody asks you how many times. I mean, they might. You can just lie. It doesn't matter how many times you took the test. Um, just say once, like it doesn't, but it's not going to be a job requirement. They're not going to ask you under oath. It doesn't matter. After you get your license, nobody cares, and that's the honest truth. um, but yeah, I let's see what else. Time management, types of study methods. Like I said, just committing that time. If you commit that you're going to study 2 hours a day, and you know, or an hour a day, whatever that time frame is, and a friend asks you out during that hour, suggest a different time or don't go. I mean, you just have to treat it like your job, and really commit the time. I will say too, for nerve reasons, they recommend you're not supposed to study the day before. Like if you don't know it by then, you're not gonna. And it's time to just rest in what you know and not panic about some random thing that you read that you don't know that probably won't even be on the test. Um, but yeah, if you're studying consistently an hour or two a day, by the time you take your exam, um, that one day is not going to do anything but make your nerves be shot. And so what they're saying really is you shouldn't be studying the day before. Um, Not that you can necessarily relax. You know, that's asking too much. Um, but yeah, to just kind of say, okay, I know what I know. I don't know what I don't know because nobody knows all of it. I mean, that's not real. And you know, the goal is not to not miss any. That's not what it takes to pass. So, um, studying methods, I think that if you take a review course, which everybody should, at least one, there are multiple review courses that focus on different things. Um, but taking more than one review course and using their resources, if they give you a question bank, um, if they give you pharmacology information. What we used to do when I did ATI is we gave things like information on the top 50 prescribed medications. Because if you're going to get a question about a medication, it's probably going to be one of those. Um, so there are just resources like that that they will give you, and mastering those resources makes all the difference in the world. They do have actual statistics that if you take a review course and you study the way that they tell you to, your chances of passing the NCLEX improve exponentially. So I would definitely say, and there are some like, oh, I'm trying to remember the names. Like a Hearst review is a lot of content. So if you have big content knowledge gaps, that's what they focus on. Kaplan reviews are a lot of test taking strategies, which test taking strategies are great, but test taking strategies won't get you to pass the NCLEX. What statistics say is that content is really what makes the difference. If you know the content, there's no test taking strategy out there. The questions can't trip you up because you know your stuff. So, and their goal is not to trick you as much as it feels that way sometimes. Their goal is not to trick you. Their goal is to make sure that you're a safe nurse. So, um, but yeah, there's lots and lots of test taking strategies out there. Um, but nothing beats content knowledge. So, are there any other questions you can think of about the NCLEX that they've specifically asked or?
No, nothing too specific. I think we've had a couple different mentors like touch on the NCLEX a few different times. So I
Mhm.
think everybody's kind of been giving like general overview knowledge. So I think it's been really helpful. It's been really good to have the information that everybody's giving.
Okay. Yeah, there's just little things like um and I appreciated too, even in their reviews, they would kind of point out your own bad habits. Like, one of the things I used to do is I would, when we would take the test on the computer, it would tell you after you were done how many times you switched your answer from the correct answer to the wrong answer. And I did that a lot until they just said, go with your gut and stop switching your answer. Like, unless you can out loud give a rationale as to why you chose the wrong answer. Don't pick a different answer just because you think a different answer is correct. So there's just stuff like that, that they do in the review courses too, that I think helps a lot. Or students find out, it'll give you this big scenario, and then it asks you a very specific question. And that very specific question, if they would just go back and read it a second time, then they tend to answer the question correctly. Instead of being distracted about all the other information that's in the question, in the introduction or in the history or whatever, going back and reading what the question is asking a second time helps a lot too. So I think that I think that's helpful too, because once you kind of straighten out your own bad habits in testing, that alone can make a big difference. Um, and I think last time I talked about testing anxiety too. If you feel like you have really bad testing anxiety, there is such a thing as biofeedback, where you learn how to control your heart rate and your breathing and you realize what's going on with your body. And so that you don't go into fight or flight and you don't blank. Um, you don't have a mental block about information that you really do know. So that's another big suggestion. A lot I always have about the NCLEX is, to just kind of be aware of how to slow your breathing down, slow your heart rate down, so you can think clearly. Makes a huge difference. So, um, so I can talk a little bit too about, um, MSN coursework. So I did complete my master's, when let's see, I graduated with my master's in 2017. So I started it in 2014. And my master's was in nursing education, which was nice because I was trained as a nurse, but not as an educator. So I learned a lot about education, in my master's program, and it helped a lot. But, um, that all of my coursework was online. Some master's programs are not like that. You do have to have, I had to have practicum hours where I was with another educator, but those were very open. It's not the same thing as trying to do like a shift with somebody at the hospital or whatever. So I did have to do hours in person as far as kind of like clinical hours. Um, but it was only my last semester. So it wasn't a ton for the master's path that I went on. Some of them, of course, are more than that. But the work itself was all online. Um, I wrote lots and lots of papers, which didn't bother me. I'm fine with that. Um, but it was a good experience, and I was working full time. I was the director of an LPN program when I went through my master's, and it was a lot and I was busy, but I finished it. I finished with a 4.0, so I it was doable. And it was very specific to what I was wanting to do, which I appreciated. I think that's what I enjoyed the most about it. That was the first time I ever did coursework. Now we took like some statistic classes and things like that because you have to be able to read scientific research, um, and those sort and know what they're talking about. But, most of it was very, very specific to what I needed to learn about. And so I enjoyed it a lot. The program was where you could do it. I think if you did it as fast as you could, it could be done in like a year and a half, year and a half. But that was taking full load year round. which I did not do. So that is the other part that made it doable. I finished it in 3 years, had a baby in the middle of it. So I was in some summer courses that were June and July. And I remember emailing my professor and being like, listen, and we could get the coursework done as fast as we wanted to. Um, so they would give us the whole summer schedule and all the assignments. And if you turned it all in, then you were done. So I remember those summer courses, I'd email my professor and I was like, I'm having a baby at the beginning of July. So all of my coursework will be turned in the month of June. She was like, okay, sounds good. So I just buckled down and did all of it in 1 month. So there are things like that. And they were very aware that we were working. Um, they were they were just great to work with as far as understanding, where we were and what we were doing and those sorts of things. Um, Let me see what else it said. Cost, I don't remember. I've lost a lot of sleep since then. Um, it wasn't as expensive as my bachelor's, I know that. It was reasonably priced. And I will say, like, not only did it open me up for more jobs, of course, but it was valuable information. It wasn't feeling like I was learning something that I already learned, or, this is just hoop jumping or whatever. I did learn a lot about education that I did not know before. And it really did prep me for being a nurse educator at the university level. And then I did not go back for my doctorate. I was tempted for a little while. And my husband still swears, like, I know you'll do it eventually. I'm like, no, I don't think so. But he insists that I will. I don't know. Um, but yeah, so I can't speak to that. But the thesis, you do a thesis at the end, where you kind of conduct your own research. And so that was fun. And uh, wrote about it. And I had to take an exit exam. So you have to pass the exit exam to get your degree, which was, and it was all essay. So it was nerve wracking, but it was fine. By the time when it was over, I was like, okay, these are questions. This is core course material that they're asking about. Or core program material, I should say. This is not some random whatever. So it was doable. And you could either take the exit exam or you could take the exam to become a certified nurse educator. And I just took their exit exam because I was afraid of doing the certified nurse educator exam. But yeah, it was great. And yeah, I'm trying to think of what else. I think time and cost wise, it's nice that they let you kind of do it however you want to. If you want to, and they gave a time frame that you had to get it done in, but I think it was a very long, like 5 years or something like that. I mean, you could spread it out pretty thin, if you or skip a semester. You could take a summer off, or do whatever you needed to do, to make it through. So I enjoyed it a lot. Um, Nurse management. Oh man. Um, I Nurse management was very interesting. I was I was the manager over a labor and delivery unit at 25 years old, and most of the nurses were older than me, which I think was difficult for them. It wasn't really difficult for me. I didn't care, but because I'm the oldest child and have a strong personality, so it doesn't bother me. But I think it bothered them. And I thought that I wanted a master's in hospital administration until I was in nurse management and found out that I did not. So that was good. And it was it was an experience that helped propel me in my career and all those good things. But it's a challenge because you are what they call middle management. So you're trying to make the nurses underneath you happy and you're trying to make hospital administration happy. And they're both never happy at the same time. Um, it's a lot of no, they're never all they can't all be happy. So that's probably the biggest challenge is the hospital administrators understanding what the nurses are doing and the nurses understanding what hospital administration is doing because they're they're both important parts of the hospital system and they don't communicate very much and they don't have much interaction or anything like that. Um, but it's just hard to understand what the other group is going through because they look at each other in sometimes unfair ways. So, but as the nurse manager, you're stuck in the middle. So that can be difficult. Um, but I tried my best to enact positive changes in our unit, which was fun. I got to enact some things that I was like, I think this is a good idea. Some of it went great, some of it didn't. So then we tried something different. Um, but yeah, it's a challenge for sure. Um, in different places is going to be different types of management. I mean, I was over a labor and delivery unit that, you know, was there 24/7. Some nurse management, if you're doing home health and those sorts of things, that's not always 24/7. Sometimes you're on call, sometimes you're not. Sometimes it's a holiday. Sometimes, the schedule can be very different depending on if you're managing a clinic that's only open 8 to 5. That's different too. Um, so anyway, it just depends on the type of nurse management that you want to do. Even being over the LPN program, which was a totally different type of nurse management because my instructors were nurses. So that was interesting too, as far as, getting their ideas and implementing their ideas and just trying to make the program as healthy as possible as a whole. But yeah, I think as a nurse, you don't appreciate your management as much as you do once you've experienced it. And um, I heard a lot of students say that who were in LPN school because they had worked as a CNA for 10 or 15 years and they had things to say about LPNs, like they don't do a whole lot but computer work and just like what are they doing while I'm doing this and blah blah blah. Well, then they would come back after they were in LPN and be like, I get it now. I feel bad for what I thought all those years because things are put in their lap or they're overwhelmed with paperwork or they just have a different role. And I think that's so important in nursing to understand that you don't understand what your nurse manager is going through. You don't understand what the hospital administration is going through. You understand your experience. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. Not that there's not room for improvement and not that you shouldn't speak up and express your thoughts and feelings about how you think things should go or how to improve things or anything like that. But I think just being aware that you don't know until you're there helps a lot. And just I think as a nurse, it's important to be vocal about, hey, I noticed we're doing something this way and I wondered why that is. And a lot of times you'll get an answer that you're like, oh, I had no idea that this decision was made because of X, Y, and Z, or you've tried it this way before and it didn't work because of this, or whatever. But I think being vocal and not in a negative way, just in an open and honest way, helps a lot with that too. Um, but yeah, nurse management it's tough, but it's definitely rewarding because you do get to impact patient care in a variety of ways through the nurses, through protocols and procedure. What is the word I'm looking for? Um, yeah, like procedure manuals and things like that, how you go through and handle emergency situations, or you get to you get to mess with all of that when you're a nurse manager. So that's a lot of fun. Um, so anyway, that's kind of my 2 cents about nurse management. There was another. Oh, tips for a new registered nurse living on your own as a first job. I would say, as a new nurse, just remember that sometimes there are culture issues in nursing that started before you got there, and they're not personal. I think a lot of times with new nurses, and this has been this way for a long time, but nursing culture is we tend to kind of eat our young, is what we say. We tend to not be nice to new nurses sometimes, which is sad. And I wish it wasn't that way. And I tried to change that a lot when I was working in nurse management. But I will say, when and if you encounter that those sorts of attitudes, the best thing you can do is just let it roll off your back and remember why you became a nurse, which is because you want to care for people. The second thing is, you like, people who aren't kind to new nurses, you never know what they're going through, what they've been through, those sorts of things. All you have control over is your own attitude and your own actions. And the best thing that you can do is just be the best nurse you can be. You're not above any patient care. So, a CNA can give a patient a bath, and so can an RN. So, you're not above anything. And I think that just as much as bad attitudes are infectious, good attitudes are infectious too. I really, when I was charge nurse on night shift, I just said, we're going to get this stuff done. And that's just all there is to it. Like, we're going to get all this stuff done. We're going to do the best job that we can. Um, and we're going to all do it together. I'm going to finish my stuff. And then when I'm done, I'm going to offer to help somebody else so that we can get all these checklists done and get all our stuff done. And I think, it doesn't matter your age or how long you've been a nurse, that attitude is infectious and people will appreciate that a lot. So, um, and I will say, don't stop asking questions. Don't don't feel like you're a burden. Everybody was a new nurse at some point. And some people have a hard time remembering that sometimes, but everybody was a new nurse. And the last thing they want you to do is go do something dangerous because you're afraid to ask. Uh, so I think, as long as you're open about, you know, hey, I need help with this. I don't understand this pump. I don't understand whatever. They may act really irritated and be upset about it, but that's okay. They can just be upset. I'm not going to do anything that I don't know how to do well, and I'm not going to put my patient in danger at the risk of making somebody upset. Um, so yeah, there are. The other thing I would say is to lean on the policy and procedure manual on your floor. So if let's say you're transferring a patient or something like that, there is an actual policy or procedure about how to do that and the actual steps to do that. Or to, set up a PCA pump or whatever. You can find a policy and procedure that it's all mapped out on paper and you just go through those steps. And I think anybody, a nurse manager or the person who is orienting with you, would appreciate that a lot. I think anytime you show initiative to look information up on your own, because the deal is too, whoever's orienting you may not do it correctly. And if you're asking them, they may teach you the wrong way or something like that. So, not that you don't ask them at all, but it helps too if you're looking at it on paper and they're helping you, um, learn how to do whatever it is. So um, those are all tips I would say as a new nurse. Um, if you're working night shift, black out your windows in your bedroom, get you some good sleep. Um, I'm trying to think. But yeah, I think it you won't. This is the other piece of advice I got when I graduated. It was so true. And this is going to feel like a long time when I say this, but it really isn't. You're not going to feel like you know what you're doing until you've been doing it for about 2 years. It's a lot of information. You'll have different patients, you'll have different experiences. You're not going to feel like, okay, I could take care of whoever walks in that door for about 2 years. And so just stick with it. Not that you can't make a change if you feel like you need to go to a different floor or do something different. It's not that. Um, but if it's just because you feel like you don't know, that you're not supposed to know yet. I mean, it takes 2 years for you to feel like you know what you're doing. So if you're realistic about that time frame, that helps a lot too, where you don't feel like, why am I still behind or why do I still not know all this stuff? 'Cause it just takes time. There's nothing that makes up for that time either. There's no way to learn it faster or experience it faster or whatever. So just be nice to yourself. Be kind to yourself that it takes a while, and just remember everybody was a new nurse at some point. So
No, that's really great. Makes a lot
yeah.
of sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
Um
Well, we're coming up on our hour. Was there anything else that
okay.
you would like to talk about?
I don't think so. I think that's the last that was kind of the last thing I had. The only other thing that said like labor and delivery on here was transferring between units. Um which can be a challenge, but you just do your orientation all over again. I mean, and I think it's an advantage to nursing that if you do something and you don't like it, you just do something different. Don't
Yeah,
be afraid. Yeah,
for
just
sure. That's great.
yeah, don't be afraid. Just do it. And yeah, but just give yourself grace that it just takes a long time to feel like a pro, like you know everything that's going on. So
Well,
mhm.
thank you very much, Savannah, for giving us
Yeah,
all of that great information. We really appreciate it.
absolutely. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you again.